So I think you probably have all read a little bit about Hew, but Hew Locke was born in Edinburgh in 1959. He lived in Georgetown, Guyana for many years, and now he's currently based and works in London. He is recently a Royal Academician, and his work is represented in international collections. His exhibition, Here's the Thing, was at Art Gallery in 2019. Maybe some of you saw that. And currently his work, Procession, the Procession, is on view at Tate Britain. I could keep talking about about Hew, but I won't. And then Dr. Gus Casely-Hayford, OBE, is the inaugural director of V&A East, and he was appointed in March 2020, and is Professor of Practice at SOAS, University of London. He's a curator, he's a cultural historian who writes, lectures and broadcasts widely on culture, having presented a number of series for Sky, BBC Radio, television and other channels. Somebody was just saying they were watching him at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I think people have probably seen Gus and a lot more about Hew. So I will let them carry on. I'm just delighted that you're here with us again. I know we can't talk about this piece of artwork enough, so thanks for coming. Let's enjoy the next 50 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ray Dean. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
And before we start, I just wanted to say a thank you to someone who isn't actually here. That is Jonathan Watkins, who's the present but outgoing director of Ikon and has been for many years, and for me is a bit of a hero, an exemplary force within the art sector, and it's very sad to think that we'll be losing him later this year. But just a huge thank you to him, and a thank you to everyone at Ikon for all you do so consistently just to deliver truly exemplary practice. It is an institution which is a bit of a beacon within our sector, so thank you. And what a privilege, for me, not just to be here in Birmingham amongst you all, but also to be here with one of my heroes, Hew Locke.
You're embarrassing me, boy.
Well, there's more to come. But for me anyway, I think Hew's work has spoken pretty much uniquely on a range of issues across the course of my career, on race, on migration, on empire, on globalization, on memory, issues that have become drivers to so much of my thinking, but also issues, I think, which, for anyone who's involved in the culture sector, feel incredibly timely. And it feels right that we would be having this conversation here in Birmingham. And this is the city that produced so much in the way of the armaments which underwrote colonial conquest and all of those wars during those years. This is a city that's ingenuity and hardware became crucial to maintaining empire. And it's a city that is about to host the Commonwealth Games, which is a wonderful celebration of athletics, but it was crafted, it was initiated, came into being as a means of increasing goodwill and understanding of the British Empire. And to see Hew's work at the center of this, it feels incredibly right. And I'm sure all of you have seen Foreign Exchange. It is one of those pieces that fits within Hew's canon of being not just exquisite to look at, but so thoughtful that it resonates and stays with you. And it fits within this city that has so many great arts institutions, the Ikon being just one of them, and a city that has not shied away from asking important questions about our pasts and about our future, but also in helping us to think about shifting geographies and demographies, things which I think for post-Brexit, this changing Britain, these are questions which are so important to all of us. So Hew, welcome and congratulations. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of your work, and I just think Foreign Exchange, it just speaks so powerfully to this time. But what attracted you to contribute to this particular moment focused on the Commonwealth?
Well, I grew up in a Commonwealth country. When I was young kid, a teenager rather, the Foreign Affairs, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, was just appointed, was a Guyanese guy, Sonny Ramphal, and that was a thing of real pride. And the Commonwealth meant something on a personal level because of that, but on a wider level because it's this strange but unique club, you know, of people who've been through a particular experience of empire. But of course this is changing now because other people want to join who have not got that history, and that's quite interesting.
So you grew up in Guyana. Could you tell me a little bit?
So I grew up in Guyana. I arrived in Guyana as a kid in the 60s at the time of independence. So I saw a new nation being born, and I then saw the nation turn into a cooperative republic, the first and I think probably still only cooperative republic in the world. And yeah, but still part of the Commonwealth, because that was important. You're a republic, but still you want to maintain that link, if you see what I mean.
And with this work, I mean, Birmingham, I mean, did you have a sense of the city and its history?
Yeah, I mean, I've been coming here for a long time. My wife is grew up in Shifnal, which is beyond Wolverhampton. It's up the road, basically. You know, so Birmingham is apart from Wolverhampton, one of the near metropolises. And so I'd be coming here a lot, going to the museums, going to Ikon on a regular basis. I've been going to Ikon for decades now, I think. And I feel very warmly towards Birmingham. That's not to win people, I'm saying. That's true, you know. And used to irritate me when people in London go, Birmingham. It's like, what's wrong with you people? Anyway.
But it's got a... Demographically, I come here, and as someone, I feel generally quite comfortable in cities. And I come here and I sense a certain kind of vibe, a sort of different sorts of groups coexisting,
exactly,
dynamism of culture.
Exactly.
And did you sense some of that?
Definitely. And you, for me personally, I feel comfortable here, you know.
But then at the same time, that you get a sense of that being in the present, but all around there are these...
All around is the past.
There is the past.
The past is something which you can't get away from, and sometimes I refer to it as the burden of history.
Yes.
You know, how you live with it. Well, we are literally in the past right here, you know. How you live with it, that's up to you, you know what I mean? But I find that fascinating, and I'm always like probing, but what's behind this? When did this particular building come about, you know? Who ultimately paid for this building, if you see what I mean,
yes.
Originally.
And so when you got this commission, or when you began to think about this work, what made you want to focus down on this particular statue?
Okay, so the Queen Victoria statue here, it's a statue I know well. I've walked past it a lot. And like a lot of other statues, I refer to them as being so visible that they're invisible. You know, you don't see it so well because you just pass it, oh yeah, it's there, you know. I'll meet you by the statue and you're looking for your friend, but not the statue, you know. And I grew up in Guyana, as I said, and there was a Queen Victoria statue I'd pass every day on the way to school. And the statue was outside what was once the Victoria Law Courts, now the Guyana Law Courts. The statue's got a hand missing, nose broken off. The hand was because the statue was attacked during anti-colonial struggles a long time ago. So it has its history. And the statue in Victoria Square is a replica. So making other replicas to go with it seemed to make sense because it was originally in marble. And I find that quite interesting, that it's been replaced by bronze because of a preserving of history, you know, preserving of a historical narrative as part of the centre of Birmingham.
But that's not the only connection, because like the statue in Guyana, the original one here, it had lost I think its arm and its nose.
Exactly. So obviously, if you're sculpting in marble, you got to be careful because there's certain things which are going to drop off, over time, particularly out in the elements.
But that sense of, because most people, they pass public art and they grow to not be able to see it because they pass it every day. But there is something that the way in which you intervene reminds us of, is the fact that we have a dynamic relationship with this work, that we change, it changes, the nose drops off, the arm drops off, that over time work weathers, that it tells the story not just of when it was created, but of the years that follow, of how history changes.
It tells of a period of time, weather, time shifting, time, things moving on, history moving on. Because that statue is part of history. It's part of a past history, but it's also part of a present history as well, because it's part of a basis of British identity,
And then you craft this vessel around it. I mean, I know when I think of Hew Locke, I do think of vessels, and I think, we have sort of similar sort of genealogies, and when I see your ships, I think of migration of my own family's immigration to this country, coming by boat, but I also think about forced migrations, and I think about enslavement, and I think about trade, and I think about all of those colonial vessels that basically forged an empire through sea journeys. And I think about how, for people of colour, those hulls, those sails, the shape, the silhouette of a ship, what that actually means to us, and that you chose that as being the undergirding of your work.
It just seemed logical, and as you say, I mean, these boats, you can't get away from certainly coming with my background, you can't get away from that history, that narrative. I mean, in Guyana, we know the history, we know that the land was built by slaves, literally built by slaves, by the Dutch. And the land was maintained by slaves, and then followed subsequently by indentured servants from India. So a lot of people died to make this thing, coming in boats taking stuff back. The wind, we'd stand by the seawall, and the wind cooling us was called the trade winds. And that says it all, So all of that type of thing goes into this particular piece of work. The designs, the pattern, the fretwork on the boat, that comes from Guyanese houses. That's a personal thing I put in, as I wanted to just have that, to acknowledge that history, if you see what I mean. Something else I should say is that these Victoria statues were shipped all around the world. So it seemed, again, logical that we should build a boat around her and have some replicas ready to be shipped out to these historic locations. But the thing is, you're proposing something and you think, this is never going to happen. And then you have a meeting with a couple of councillors. Please excuse me, I apologize, because this is recorded. I can't remember the names of people, but the meeting was positive. It was like, boy, we look like we're in business here, And then you check it out and you think, this thing can't really happen. And then you start realizing, my God, this could actually happen, So, full marks of Birmingham. As I was saying to Gus earlier, I couldn't see this happening in London. So it's amazing. It's absolutely bloody amazing. Something else I should say is that I was reminded recently that after the Indian mutiny, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, First War of Independence, there was a change in policy in relation to empire colonies, and because of that, 50 Victoria statues were shipped out to India. One of the Maharajas out there, he spent £15,000, which is a lot of money back in the late 19th century. on a marble statue of her. So history is complicated, you know? And I find that complication is where I get excited, like, you know, and it's more complicated than even what I'm saying now, you know?
But the beauty of your work is that, you know, I look back on this history through a lens of enslavement and colonialism and, you know, terrible things that happened not just to my ancestors, but to many millions of people. Mm-hmm. And you managed to navigate that complex past, some of which has been willfully misrepresented and systematically either denigrated or left out of things like our national curriculum. But you navigate all of that stuff without a kind of bitterness, that you bring a kind of poetic beauty to dealing with issues that are so poignant and so difficult to navigate, that your work is cathartic in its beauty, and yet at the same time it deals with such sensitivity with these very serious issues. I mean, for you in making this work, is it enormously painful? Is it difficult, or do you find it cathartic?
It's a struggle just to get something looking right. Mm. But it's a way to deal with anger and frustration, you know? It's a way to deal with why is this being ignored, you know? I always say is that I can't live in misery, you know? I can't, because some of these pasts are very difficult things, particularly when you read the historical narratives. You just think, what was some of these people thinking when they were doing these terrible things, you know? I can't live in that, so I'm trying to make something, what I'm trying to, oh God, this is so difficult to talk about, man, you know? I'm trying to make stuff which draws people in. Because if I could bash people over the head with something really grim, I could do that. I could make my work like that. But A, I couldn't live with that because it'd be too miserable. And B, some people may turn away. And for me, it's like fly fishing. I don't fly fish. Like I'm throwing out the lure. Come in. This is nice. Oh, and I get people to look closer at what I'm talking about, you know, But then it's something for me which has to be attractive, you know.
Well, I think for me, you succeed in ways that I think are truly exceptional. And it speaks so powerfully to this time in a period in which I do think we feel incredibly polarized, and that a lot of the discourse around a lot of issues connected to things that I felt very hopeful about a generation ago have felt very, very difficult. And you managed to find a route through those things that feels elegant, that feels positive, that feels hopeful, and fundamentally is so beautiful as well. So I'm very grateful to you about that. And now, those Victorias standing on the boat, that they have these gold crowns and attachments. Can you tell me something about?
Yeah, again, after decades of working the way I work on instinct, and these are made in cardboard and cast, and they're sort of heads. They're gladiatorial heads, gladiatorial masks, but they're also the masks of a kind of Britannia figure going into battle. And she's literally going into battle because of the medals she's got on her for various different colonial wars.
Gosh,
But then it's about. I mean, things like the generic things, like you do something like that with the rays coming off the mask, and obviously it's like, oh, that's a bit like the Statue of Liberty. Oh, that's a bit like a Madonna, because she was the Madonna. She was such an iconic figure in the 19th century, So it's playing with all of that, you know.
But things like those colonial wars, like there's the medal for the Asante
Yes.
invasion, and that's something where 12,000, a force of 12,000, I think they were naval troops who arrive on the coast of what was then the Gold Coast, and they march to Kumasi, and they wipe out basically a generation, burn down the whole of the city, and they take with them hundreds of the finest gold pieces from the royal collection, and those are brought back and they are sold, and that today they are in collections right across Europe and North America, and there's a medal there for that. I mean, what does that? Can you give me a sense of?
Basically, what the piece is. You can the work I make. You can read it one way, or you can read it another, or you can go deeper, and it's coded. You know, you can pick it apart. It's designed to be picked apart. That's what it's designed to be. So there's a medal for the Second Afghan War, and the Second Afghan War is I find quite fascinating because that's a conflict between Britain and a proxy war with Russia. And the boundaries of the Soviet Union are tied up with it. There's so many things tied up in these small discs.
And at this moment, post kind of Black Lives Matters and that whole kind of shift in political consciousness, I mean, have you felt freed, or have you felt a greater kind of set of pressures upon you in terms of the work you do and the reception you get?
There is pressure. There's always pressure. With a piece like this in Birmingham, there's pressure to deliver something that at least I think, well, at least it looks okay. You know.
It looks.
Because that's the important thing. Because it's public art. You know what I mean? Money has been spent.
Yes.
You know. And I need to be able to hold my head up and say, right, good. Well, what you think about it, but aesthetically, at least it works, you know. And that for me, I spent quite a while looking at it today and thinking, boy, it's all right, you know. It's all right.
It's magnificent.
Yeah.
I can remember I came down the hill and approached it from behind the first time, and it looks so much like it should have always been there that I didn't recognize it as a contemporary intervention. It just feels
and that was important. It's important that it looks convincing, to the point where on the first day somebody's coming by and asking one of the people from Ikon, I think it was, saying, why have you removed the statue? I was like, oh, it works. It's a conjurer's trick. That's what this is, you know. But I should say that these things like this, I haven't made this piece myself. It's been made, I design it, I go through it meticulously, make sure it happens. It's been made by Pangolin Designs, and the Pangolin and Stroud. And without them, this would not have happened, you know what I mean? But it's about, again, working with somebody and making sure that they have got the same attention to detail that you have. For a very simple thing, there's a plaque telling you what the name of the piece and what it's about. The fact that that's aged to look old was, without that, the whole thing falls apart. Like, everything has got to be believable, you know?
And it's a shame that it's not going to be on for longer, but it's an interesting temporal juxtaposition that between the Jubilee and then also that I know that there's a kind of a festival that happens beyond it that looks at sort of Britain and Britishness and thinks about our place.
I suppose it's kind of a nice symmetry to it, you know. Like it's just, and the important thing about it is that you see this thing, and it's important that it's a temporary piece, so it's gone, and then you go, oh right, God, and I would like people if this is a dream, you know, 2-3 years time, they go, boy, I remember that thing, you know? Girl, you know what I mean? So it stays as this strange thing. Did that really happen? You know?
And over this last 2 years, that both in North America but also here in Britain, there has been a sense in which we've reevaluated the public realm through a lens of colonialism in thinking about our imperial past. I think about Bristol and Colston and things.
Yeah.
I mean, how watching those things unfold, how have you felt about it?
Well, shock in a way, because you think that things are static, you think that things won't change because there's a status quo, and all of a sudden things change. I was taking part in a biennial in New Orleans. I can't remember, 2015 or something like that. And I was being driven through the streets back home late at night. And they pointed out to me this statue on this, their Nelson's column. And there's Robert E. Lee on this column.
Wow.
And saying, Hew, we're looking to take this thing down.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, really? You know, that's before the whole thing kicked off and everything got really, really dark and messy, you know. But that was really interesting. And then obviously history takes over, you know.
But you have done, but the Colston in Bristol, you've actually had some...
Yes, well, I made what I would call impossible proposals. And one of them was a decorative imagination of a Colston statue where I comment on it and make it more beautiful, but also more relevant in a way, you know, if that's not too arrogant to say. But having said that, this series is all called Impossible Proposals. After this experience in Birmingham, there are no possible proposals, you know?
And can you tell us a little bit how young Hew got started? I mean, what were the things that kind of...
Oh, that's simple. Basically, two parents as artists. One, my father was a sculptor. We showed together twice at Tate, which was kind of cool. Unfortunately, posthumously, but there we go. And my mother was a painter. Because we were struggling financially, I remember telling my mother when I was 14, there's no way I'm going to become an artist. And I made serious efforts to avoid it, you know. But I was in art class in secondary school. I would have been about 15, and we were given a still life. And I was painting. It was a painted hibiscus flower. So I'm painting it, and I'm getting it. And after about 40 minutes, something clicked, and I wasn't painting it or copying it out, as they would say in Guyana, copying the thing. I was creating this flower. Wow. Making something. I still got it. It's not a very good painting, I must say, but it's how you start, you know, by these small things. Decades later, you sit in a church and you're talking about a big piece of art you've made, you know.
And who were your... I remember you, but can you give me a sense of your art school contemporaries and what that world was like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was at college with Ghani, and I was around artists, Johannes Vakela, Godfrey Dunker, Chris Feely, Tim Nosu Webster. I mean, I started out, I suppose, at college at the time of the YBA thing, but that wasn't me. I was interested in what was coming out of Africa, contemporary African art. I was really interested in what was coming out of Cuba, Latin America in general. There was a growing thing coming out of the global south, as we now call it. That was what I was interested in. But there was no... I've got to watch myself, I'm not boring. I'm doing fine, yeah? But anyway.
You're doing brilliantly.
But it's... there was no space for a certain dialogue back then, you know? And it seems like a long time ago. It was a different world, you know? It was a different world.
But how did you then, whilst the YBAs were all getting huge amounts of praise and shows and all of that, how did you maintain your kind of inner
right.
sense of self and continue?
For any artist, the work has to drive you.
Yeah.
The work itself, the desire to make whatever you're trying to make. And that's the thing which drives you, which drives me still today. What kept me going? I think friends keep you going. I mean, but also what we realize, me and artists like Godfrey Dunker, sorry Godfrey, I'm calling your name out anyway. Godfrey Dunker, great artist.
He is wonderful.
Yeah. But we decided nobody's doing it for us, we got to do it for ourselves. So we set up our own exhibitions, and that kicked things off for us, basically. But if nobody's coming to do it for you, you can sit down and moan and cry and all this kind of stuff like that. We moaned, you know, we didn't cry. But then you have to make it for yourself, you know, and that's what we did. So we did a show at the Brunei Gallery at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and that changed things for us, basically. But we did have to do things for ourselves, because otherwise it wasn't going to happen.
But it's strange now, if I think of who I see as the most significant contemporary artists at this moment, it would be you, it would be Yinka, it would be Christopher. You know, it's interesting how there has been a change. I mean, and are you now reflecting upon that? Are you pleased and happy and resolved about it, or do you still feel, do you feel angry, or do you feel, I mean, how do you feel about the fact that it's taken?
I think, okay, what's interesting about this is being recorded, it's very, very public, so I'm sort of being open, but at the same time, part of me is, do I say this, do I say this?
Say it, please.
I'm angry, if I'm angry at all, about the artists, the black artists who should have been given their due in the 80s. I know it's happening now, you know, but there was a time, it's taken a bloody long time, quite frankly. You know, there was a time when it could have happened, you know. It's almost like people are discovering, people are going, yeah, God, their work is so wonderful. It was wonderful 25 years ago, you know, thank you very much, you know. And I'm talking about me, I'm talking about other people, you know. Yeah. It was really good work, you know what I mean. There was nothing wrong with it, it's just that you guys got caught up in your own little thing over here, you know. And yeah, I gotta watch what I say, you know. But
No. But I think it's glorious to see, if decades too late, people like Frank Bowling being acknowledged.
Honestly, that an amazing painter, you know what I mean? I mean, I remember him from when I was small in Guyana, two men, my father arguing with this man. Like, why are they rowing? Like almost violent arguments about art. You know, I would have been about 7 years old and these two guys are arguing. One of my earliest memories of a violent verbal argument, you know, and it was about art, and Frank Bowling, you know, and my dad arguing. I think you're wrong, I think you're right. No, you're wrong. You know? And yeah, so it's not surprising that all these years, decades later, I sit down here, and every time I see Frank, I look at Frank, boy, Frank is from Guyana, by the way, so I've known him and his work for many years. As you can gather, this conversation is rambling all over the show.
And your father, though, if he were here now, if he were to go to the Hayward or go to Tate or to come up here or to the many other places in which they are quite rightly celebrating Hew Locke, what would he say? What would he feel?
I'm better than him. Come on, look at my work, man. No. He'd be really proud. But yeah, there was an exhibition, which is a famous exhibition, which got panned very badly back in the day. It was an exhibition called The Other Story.
Oh yes.
And I always remember turning up to the opening. My dad was in it. Great work, you know. I'm at art school, leave art school, and all of a sudden I could see his work fresh, open eyes, you know. His reaction, how come you're taller than me? But it was, yeah, he was one of the closest confidants, apart from my wife, one of my closest confidants about art. And I miss him for that, I miss him for that. And as I said, I've been in 2 exhibitions where I'm showing alongside my father at Tate Britain. That's quite extraordinary. That doesn't happen to many people at all, So something has shifted in this country, and that's quite wonderful. And so that thing which has shifted is sort of echoed here, or you can, for me, I feel it when this Birmingham Commission, man, this wouldn't have happened back in the day, and for lots of reasons, and now it's there, and it's, thank you very much,
Oh, yeah, well, you deserve it. And the shift, I think one of the great catalysts for it has been you, Hew. So I think it's wonderful that, that you get some of the rewards from that, but also that the other recipient of the reward from that is all of us, because your work is deeply inspirational. But I think also for a younger generation, they might sit in school and that they know that the curriculum is widening to better reflect global histories.
Yeah, that's necessary.
But where are the books? Where is, where are the facts? Where it's not underwritten by wider knowledge, but your work, the way in which you carry yourself, it is an inspiration. And, I'm hugely grateful for all you've done to inspire a generation, but also the legacy you leave in an incredible body of art is just, I think it is absolutely kind of fantastic. But we're going to open up now to some questions, and some of those have been sent in advance. So.
Brilliant. So we had some questions that were sent in. Thank you so much. We haven't at the end of these, guys. And I'm going to read some of them out, and they'll answer. And then if we've got time, we could maybe open up the floor to them as well. And I won't call out full names, but we've got a question from Jane, which is about Guyana. So I presume it's for you, Hew.
Okay.
Guyana is a multi-layered country. Is your work influenced by both the Indian and African Guyanese experience? And if so, how?
Yes, simple answer. Absolutely. 52% of the population of Guyana are descended from indentured servants from India. So it gives a very particular feel to the country. There are parts of the country I can stand you up and you think you're in India,
And you've spoken a little bit about this already, but I'll ask the question anyway. Maybe you might want to go a bit deeper. It's from Lara. It says, statues and memorials such as Queen Victoria are imbued with the spirit of empire and redolent of colonialism, which is manifest today. Do you think, post-Colston, that there is a need for this kind of memorialisation, and what does it need to say now?
I think it doesn't have, you can have memorialisation, but it doesn't have to be a statue. There are many ways of doing this these days. Having said that, though, I could understand the need for an actual realization of Mary Seacole, for example, to see her as a figure, fully formed figure. But I don't think it's absolutely 100% necessary. Say, for example, somebody from history who made amazing speeches. You don't have to have their image. You can have an image of carved in marble or in bronze of what they said, and that could be as powerful. But I think there is a need, there seems to be a need to have a memorial, a place for people to go. If they're going to put flowers or whatever, but it's a difficult thing, because if it's a tragedy, I'm not going to go into, there are many tragedies. If it's a tragic event that's being commemorated, how do you memorialize that? And that's very difficult, very difficult.
And when you make your work, is it for our time? Is it for yourself? Is it thinking about something that you're thinking in, as with the Colston, in 200 years, how it might be judged, or do you not think?
I'm always, particularly for public art pieces, I'm always thinking, how is this going to look? How is this going to age in 10 years' time? Very much so, because there was a book about public art, which I thought I'm never going to happen to me. And the book was called "What's That Thing Over There?" And that was a negative comment on public art, which people find not even offensive, but just nothing, you know. And yeah, but definitely it's got to feel timeless in an ideal world, you know.
You led on to the next question really nicely. So we've had reviews and we've had comments about this piece of work, as you know, and the Birmingham Post said foreign exchange, in the Birmingham Post it was described as, quote, making two worlds collide which don't need to collide. Could I ask your thoughts on this? And this is
which don't need to collide.
Yes, the quote was...
They've already collided, you know. The mere fact that I'm sitting here means that these worlds have collided, you know what I mean? You know, it's too late to be saying something like that.
But I think also that does ignore the genealogical or the demographic complexity of this nation, of this city.
Exactly.
Those collisions that they course through our blood, you know, that they are in our markets, in the streets, in the food that we eat. And it's absolutely right that
I mean, it's what makes this country great, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, and collision, but collision has been the history of this country, you know, for centuries. So, I mean, even think of the things like the Black Presence and stuff like that. I mean, this is not an overnight thing. This has been going on for a long time, you know, and so this collision's been going. So I think that's a mistake, that statement, if I dare I say it.
But also that dialogue of that kind is what makes our nation what it's always been, and that we chose a Union flag, for instance, rather than a tricolour. That we chose a flag that is a variety of different kinds of identity, one placed upon another, an acceptance that even in the creation of this country, that we accepted that there was difference, that there was diversity. We weren't just a single unified thing. We were multiple things that learned to live together.
And I'm going to steal that one.
It just reminded me of, there was an exhibition that's just come out of the Library of Birmingham that was part of the festival by Sampad called From Britain. I've totally forgotten the name of it now. City of Empire to City of Diversity. Thank you. You've all seen it. And in one of the hoardings for that, there's a sort of a line that says, "We are here because you were there," which always struck with me. So it's a similar thing. One more question, then we might have time from the floor, from Margaret, which says, it's a bit more about your work. Can you speak a little bit about the process of collecting and sourcing found objects and materials used in your work? Is there a significance to their journeys, where they are made, for instance?
Oh, that's a good question. I work a lot with in this piece, yes, because I use lots of replica medals, and I spend all my time online looking at replica medals, dreaming of being able to get Victorian medals, the actual real thing. Occasionally I have enough cash to buy one. But it's the history and the actual objects. It's not just that. I mean, it's about finding something, and I have obsessions, and medals, Victorian medals is one of my obsessions because it's about what these things signify, you know. And it's how the thing feels in the hand, how it looks, the design, what the medal is trying to tell me, and what I'm picking apart from what they're not trying to, what they're missing out, shall we say, you know.
Is there anyone with a burning question? Everyone's gone quiet. If there isn't anyone with a burning question, also, by the way, Hew, I think we might be able to hook you up with a medal if you're interested.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we've got a question. All right, thank you. Do you want the microphone? It's a little bit easier, so I'll just bring it over.
Hi, Hew. Sorry. Do you think you would have had the same impact with the artwork if it had not been an installation on the statue and been separate? As a separate artwork, as we've seen with Luke.
A separate thing completely next? No, it had to be the real thing. It has to be something that people believe is real. Otherwise, it would be something quite different. I mean, like if I made a variation now, it would be a memory of a piece, and that'd be fine, but the piece has to come from something real. And the fact that this is the real statue, and I know that that's the real statue under there, that's what gets me excited about the whole idea. You know, oh, sorry.
So I mentioned it, there was a Luke Perry statue that was a sculpture that was just by the side of the Queen Victoria, which also had a conversation about similar things. And I just wanted to know if you thought you could have had the same impact if it wasn't on the actual statue itself.
Okay, here's where I back down. I take it back. It depends. You're quite right. It could have worked, but it depends on what was done, and what you're allowed to do. There's something about, but for me, there's definitely something about encasing the statue in something, encasing it into a different narrative to what it is every day. It just becomes, it's almost like that X factor thing, which takes it into a completely different realm. Yes, you can do something next to it, and that will be okay, but it's a heck of a lot better to be able to work with the real thing. You know, that I feel anyway.
Thank you. Got one more here, is that all right?
Okay, hi. So, as you know, there's this ongoing debate as to statues of historical figures in Britain, as to whether we should get rid of them or tear them down or keep them up. And there's people on both sides, people wanting to protect them and people wanting to remove them. And your work obviously has added to a controversial statue rather than taking it down. So do you think that that is a way that we could go forward sort of with educating about maybe the past of these sort of statues of historical figures in future?
That's my approach, is not to, because you take the statues down, take them all down, then you've got a problem in that history has got lost, yeah. There's nothing there to talk about anymore. If the statues are there, there's something there to talk about. I think the statues should, I'm not saying every single one at all, not by any stretch, but with an explanation of some sort as to a different approach to looking at them, if you see what I mean. That would be useful, extremely useful. But taking them down and chucking them into a sort of a Soviet theme park is not the way to go at all. You know?
Okay, one more, last one. No, this is great.
Piggybacking on what was just said there, what do you think in terms of, you said you think not all of them should necessarily be taken down, or, you know, you didn't really expand on that, but in terms of the ones that are kept, if they represent a historical figure who, you know, had a negative impact for whatever reason, how would you approach that in terms of your perspective on how that should be showcased? Because generally speaking, when we have statues, it's to celebrate someone, it's to idolize them. We don't really have statues of people that, you know, are villainized in history. So what would your approach be?
I mean, my approach, and this is where you get lost in committees for years and decades, and that's the problem. That was the problem with Colston, is that you need some sort of explanatory plaque on this work. You know, I'm not saying every them, but some of them. There are one or two which are really problematic, and that's, I'm not even sure I want to get into that here, but that's tricky. You definitely need a plaque on some of these things to talk about who these guys were, you know. I mean, some of these statues were put up at a particular point in time when they couldn't have been put up in the people's lifetime. I mean, a statue of Clive of India, that wouldn't have gone up in his lifetime. People hated the guy, you know. That wouldn't have happened, but it happened. It's about the reason why statues are put up. That I find interesting. But I think that, I don't know what you have to say about this, Gus, but I feel that you need some sort of explanatory thing to say what the issue is with this particular person, you know?
When I travel in Germany and look at the truly dignified way in which they dealt with their troubling history,
absolutely,
the removal of things which are deeply offensive, but also that the construction of spaces in which one can actually find better ways of navigating through this very painful history. And that offers an opportunity for discourse and catharsis. For many peoples of African descent in this country, that our histories have been decimated systematically. Our genealogies have been decimated as well. You know, the things that we have had to tolerate, but which we have tolerated without acknowledgement even of the national curriculum, are horrendous. And so if there is that acknowledgement in the way in which the Germans have done, then I think it's absolutely fine that we can then have those statues where we can reasonably contextualize them and understand these histories, because we have dealt with some of the wider emotional, troubling stuff. But we need to do that, to have that truth, to have that resolution before we can then negotiate our way around keeping those things, because otherwise it becomes horrendous for people to have to walk around in public spaces, dealing with these histories in a kind of isolation without the acknowledgement of that pain. I think, for me anyway, I think that is intolerable. And until we get to a space in which we acknowledge those histories, I think we are actually kind of brewing up trouble for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that people get panicking and think, oh my God, this is something to be afraid of. You know, it's not the end of the world, you know? I mean, and the thing you talk about with Germany is an example, definitely an example of ways of dealing with these very, very difficult histories. And there's certain statues I'm thinking of in particular, which I think, you got to say something, man. Come on, jeez, you know, please.
On that note, thank you so much. Everybody, a round of applause, please, for Hew Locke and Gus.